What I think we want to do is we'll just go down the row here, and in 1 minute, not a short elevator, but a long elevator, give us what you do generally and then specifically with regard to cover crops. So think about that for just a second, and then when you're ready, you can begin. Why don't we hand the mic down here?
Oh, you're going to start here?
Yeah, we'll start right there.
Okay. Well, me, Briese, crop consultant from North Dakota. Generally, cover crops, I am an advocate in general to try to get them more prevalent use, and then specifically, I know growers with prescriptive services to put the right plant in the right place.
Good. Yeah, the general part doesn't need to be cover crop related.
That's good because I don't have a cover crop general. My name's Wyciskalla. I'm an independent crop consultant out of Southern Illinois. Rather diverse past. I spent 10 years as a researcher at SIU in Carbondale, then taught for another 7 years after that. And wonderful state of the state pushed me over to going into business on my own. A lot of projects I've been involved with is the cover crops and manure management because we have a lot of animal agriculture in downstate on highly erodible lands and steep slopes. And the cover crops are serving us a twofold benefit, improving water quality as well as providing a good forage for our livestock. So that's kind of the short and sweet of my story.
Okay. My name is Joe Rothermel. I farm in southern Champaign County area. I also chair the Champaign County Soil and Water Conservation District. And so through both of those, I'm trying to promote soil health.
And specifically with cover crops, what's your story?
What's my story with cover crops?
Yeah.
Well, we've been, I call it experimenting with cover crops since 2010.
Okay.
My name's Trenton, Carley. We have a family farming operation up in central Iroquois County, and I run my own independent ag retail service as well. So we've been dealing with cover crops for the past 7, probably 8 years on our own family farm. And then on the ag service side of things, we're one of the high clearance rigs in the area that actually interseeds cover crops prior and on our own farm in our area.
Well, good afternoon. Kris Reynolds with American Farmland Trust. Work primarily here in Illinois as the Deputy Director, and we work in a couple priority watersheds here in Illinois and work to improve soil health and also improve water quality in those watersheds. I'm a certified crop advisor with the 4R designation as well as the sustainability designation as well. Before coming on with American Farmland Trust for the past 2 years, I worked for the local Soil and Water Conservation District. Specifically to cover crops, of course, we recognize that cover crops are one of the best ways to reduce nutrient loss and also improve soil health. So part of the mission of American Farmland Trust is to promote sound farming practices, and so this fits in nicely with our mission. American Farmland Trust is a national nonprofit organization, and we work all across the United States, but specifically here in the Midwest, we're focused on those sound farming practices. I also farm myself about an hour south of here, and been using cover crops for about 5 years on my farm.
Okay. So what I want to do now is ask a question, and we can have an interaction, but we'll start by just going down the aisle. And at any point, if any of you really have a burning question, just make sure I see you and you can ask a question. So the first question is about low-hanging fruit. What I mean by that is, what is something that you think isn't being done or isn't being done sufficiently right now, but could make the difference in terms of getting cover crops used more or more effectively? So you have the money, so you can start there.
So I think, looking at how we integrate into the current farming system, they're very diverse. I mean, anybody driving into Springfield this week, there's a lot of tillage. So how can we incorporate cover crops into that type of system? Where in Illinois, no-till is on the decline. Specifically, no-till soybeans has reduced about 15% over the last 12 years. So how do we get back to some of the basics and incorporate something like cereal rye after corn into a system and make it successful? I think that's a way, but we have to also get farmers back to doing no-till as well on top of that.
Okay.
I would echo that on the no-till soybean side of things. That's probably one of the easiest ways to get a guy to start doing it. If you're talking about low-hanging fruit, these two recipes that you just came up with, if you're planting winter kill in front of corn, it's going to work good. You know that we're going to get more benefit from a root extra standpoint if you got something here in the spring. So if a guy's not willing to put liquid on his planter yet, then he's got to go with rye and soybeans.
Well, I think they're right. We need to bridge the gap between conventional and biological farming. Every time we have a meeting, we try and figure out how to do this, and we never really come up with one solid answer. But I think there's more than one approach. But I think one of the things that we need to focus on is like what we were talking about earlier is our retailers. Most farmers get a lot of information from the retailers. They rely on them for their fertility, even seed, chemicals, a lot of the things in their farming program. And so I think we need to get them as much information as possible. And I think that would help. And just to the nuts and bolts part of it, blowing on cereal rye with your fertilizer works great. They don't charge much to mix it. It's a great way to get started, I think.
I'm going to take the approach on the low-hanging fruit right off the bat. Being from far southern Illinois, I live in Washington County, about 50 miles straight east of St. Louis, and we have a struggle just getting the adoption of cover crops down there with a lot of producers. And I think most of it's education from the standpoint of termination. They've still got that fear that I'm not going to be able to control this cover crop and when it's time to terminate it. With my guys that are the livestock operators, it's not an issue because we're taking 1 to 2 cuttings of a forage at a harvest, and it's a lot easier to control. But in our situation in southern Illinois, we've been wet since last September. It's still wet now, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better for the next 2 months. And me being a predominantly soil sampling business, that serves a good challenge for me. But yeah, we got guys that they struggle with the determination, and then the other thing is we've got a little bit tougher farm economy coming in front of us now with changing the farm bill. There, we had a buck to about 35 thrown on top of the price of beans that we were selling last year, but that's going to go away. And when you're trying to tell a guy to throw another $30 an acre on his operating loan for his entire farm, and it's going to take 3, 4, maybe 5 years before we see that return on investment, that scares some of these guys. They will see a return on investment, but we're changing the entire system on a farm, and that's, I call it an entire system because you change everything when you add cover crops. And that's just a big fear by a lot of the farmers out there. And as an industry, as crop consultants, me and I, and others, even the co-ops, we've got to give some of these farmers more reassurances that this will work to take baby steps. And then with our early adopters, the recipe I use for early adopters is I had to write it down and to think there for a minute. I use 50 pounds of oats, so that'll winter kill out. For southern Illinois, we like to have something there with winter kill out that we don't have to control. But we also throw in 2 pounds of radish, 2 pounds of turnip, which is a little different than their handout, 2 pounds of crimson clover. Throwing a little nitrogen back into that system. We also like the turnip because it will hang on just a little bit longer than the radish if we get a late seeding timing in there, so we can try to trap some of those nutrients and keep them around in the field. So that's just a little recipe we played with on some different projects. Seems to work pretty well for us.
I think these guys covered. It's kind of hard to get the last, but do you have your gateway cover crops on there? Right, I call them the gateway drug or gateway cover crops. Cereal rye, oats, radish. Those are the easy ones. Turnips. I've actually seen turnips overwinter in North Dakota, so pretty cool, crazy thing. The other thing I would like to do is actually decouple that soil health thing from folks. I don't think you have to start with all 4 principles because it really throws a lot on them. I'm okay with tillage guys throwing cover crops in because hey, it's reducing erosion. Okay? I'm good with that. I'm good with anybody making any movement forward, any step forward. So the misconception in my neighborhood is, well, if I do cover crops, I have to be no-till. No, you don't. No, you don't. And if you planted wheat and you got volunteer wheat, you can just about use it as a cover crop. Right? It's part of the way. They don't have to till that 3, 4, 5 times to kill the wheat, and then they can plant a cover crop. It doesn't make any sense to me. Okay? Now, if you've got pests that you need to manage, things like, wheat curl light for things like wheat streak mosaic, okay, manage that for sure. But some of the cover crop seed's already there. And so there's these baby steps. Any direction we can move in the right way, but we have to have a support group. And I would strongly encourage that with the Cover Crops Anonymous thing. Get your farmers connected with other farmers. Get them connected with other people that are doing it. Make them sure that they're not on an island. Make sure that they're not alone. And take away some of that peer pressure. That really is a big part of it. And they will force the retailers to adapt.
Okay. How about a question about retailers? In your direct interaction with retailers, and of course some of you are retailers, what do you see as the biggest constraint to the retailers making a really significant move into more technical support or selling of cover crop services? What's holding that back? I mean, why don't we have all retailers leading the way?
I guess I'm first now.
Yeah.
I'll take it if you don't want to.
I think we got to monetize it somehow. It's got to be a service that they can get paid for. It's got to be worthwhile. And the same thing is true of a crop advisor. It has to be something worthwhile. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of study. There's a lot of preparation. It has to mean something. It has to have value.
Well, in my area, there's not much demand, and so they have to make money with retailers, and I've often heard them say that we need to move product, so it's whatever the demand is, and there's just not much of that in my area.
They're both right. I mean, on the retailer side, it comes down to margins. And the stuff that moves in your major co-ops is the stuff that's going to have the higher margins. And they're not equipped, the infrastructure isn't equipped. When you look at the buying cycle when farmers are making decisions, you compare Joe's comment on demand, there's not a lot of people asking in certain areas. So by the time all these decisions have been made with prepaid programs in December and January and February, and they're locked in, then you got somebody coming and saying, hey, why don't you try cover crop for the first time, and they haven't allocated that in the budget, then they're kind of stuck. So to play in on this gentleman's comment earlier, $30 on top, we do a lot of work with reallocating dollars within the budget to make room for that on the front side when we talk to people about putting crop programs together in general. So the cover crop conversation that we talk about, I mean, it really is a 365-day conversation you can have year-round. And it's a conversation that has to be had, at the same time if you're placing that seed order for corn and soybeans, you need to be asking, hey, what are you thinking about doing for your cover crop? At the same time as you're locking in the herbicides in December, January, and here in February, making final decisions, they need to be talking about, what is that going to look like working with your cover crop? And most retailers aren't educated enough to do that.
Anybody else want to take a swing at that?
Yeah, I'll just make a few comments. We work really closely with some of the retailers in our watershed projects, and it's certainly a struggle to try to get more involvement from them to promote cover crops. I mean, they're doing a lot of things with nutrient management that's really helping out the watershed projects. But what I've seen in other areas across the state is where you have really good cover crop seed dealers, there is a lot more adoption of cover crops in those areas. When you have someone local, whether it's through a local co-op or an independent seed dealer, there is certainly a higher level of cover crops being done in those areas. And the other thing I've noticed is where you have farmers that are also doing custom cover crop seeding for other farmers, there's certainly a much higher level of that practice being done. And maybe, those other farmers are still going through NRCS and some of their programs, but it seems to be that there's a real value in there in having that local expertise and being able to go directly to those seed dealers and directly to the folks that are doing some of that work for them.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, so when talking with farmers about cover crops, what is the reason why to use cover crops that seems to be most effective? And then maybe I guess with that, if you want to comment on the flip side, is there something that maybe we are pushing as a reason why that just is not that interesting to a lot of farmers?
I think the easy one in one of the particular areas that I work in is just erosion control. I mean, that's something that is very evident. I mean, farmers can look at it, they can see it. When we talk about cover crops and reducing nitrate loss, for example, that's something that's kind of hard for the farmer to see. But when you talk about soil loss, most of the time they can say, yeah, I'm not losing near the soil I was from when I wasn't doing cover crop.
It depends on the farmer, man. I mean, everybody's got a different operation, so you just pick what's going to be the easiest thing for somebody to implement. So if the guy does have livestock, it's easy, real easy, if he's willing to do some grazing. So you pick the product that's going to work for the guy and help him, like you said, whatever the next step is, even if it's a small step. So a lot of different ways.
Go ahead, I'll let you answer.
So, I think it has to be customized and tailored. I think it has to fit that person. I don't think it's like buying shoes, right? We can't just buy a size 10 and distribute them around the room. It's not going to work. So I think it has to be customized. So the only way that I've had success is standing in the field with a farmer and pointing out issues and questioning them and getting them to realize it is an issue, that there is a problem, and then trying to give solutions to them. I think that's what it works. And as far as the negative connotation, I've seen the livestock focus be a negative. I've seen livestock focus on cover crops, even though it's a big economic boon for the guys that have livestock. The guy that does it, he's like, well, I have to get cows now? I'm not going to do that. So that to me has been, it's been something we've had to overcome in my area. It's not just for cattlemen. It's really good benefit for cattlemen, there's no doubt about that. You don't have to get cows in order to put cover crops in. Break the rules, I guess is where I'm coming from. I like the suggestions, I like the tenets, I like the ideas, but go ahead and break them.
Yeah, I agree with the break the rules side of things. From my standpoint, I have guys come to me and ask about cover crops. I've got other customers in my database I know that I don't even mention the word cover crops to because it's not going to work, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And then I've got other guys that are a little more open to suggestion. And me being that former university researcher and kind of geeky with the computer programs, things like that, I drive around and after rainfall events, I collect water samples from areas of runoff from my customers' fields, analyze them at my cost versus passing the savings on to them, and actually just show them what's leaving some of their fields. I mean, over the years, I can model my database and see a decline in soil test potassium values on the field and show that it's leaving in runoff water. And that's something I can take back to my guys and show them, it may take 4, 5, 6 years to get their mindset to start turning around and look at something different. And say, if you have these cover crops out here, you might be able to trap some more of these nutrients and keep them in place. And in deep southern Illinois, a lot of the Midwest, 75 years ago, we had small farms, we had livestock on all these farms, and at least a third, maybe half of that farm had something green on it. We had our perennial hay crops or perennial pasture crops. We would put oats and some of our winter crops in there for a feed or forage for the next year. And we've gone away from that in a lot of areas as the farms get bigger. And it's something that as you look at it, and one guy said downstate at a meeting last fall, he said, when I took the farm, he said, I went to the mindset that I want my farm to be in better shape when my kids take home.
The dust storms that we had here in 2017 created some talking points for some of my local, or some of my neighbors as far as reduced tillage. A lot of them are chiseling bean stubble, and we just had a mess. It blew and then it washed from heavy rain. And so I noticed some of them had switched from chiseling bean stubble to vertical tillage. I guess it's a step in the right direction. I don't know. But sometimes you don't really have to say anything. Some of my neighbors can see how clean bean fields are after a good standing cereal ride. And I think that helps because I know some of them they're trying it now, and they'll pull into my farm and ask questions. And so sometimes they come to you. So.
Okay, how about the question? We have a question? Yes, Shelby.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I would like to know from your experience as a retailer or farmers and talking to other farmers, what are some positive realities that you've heard from your peers about cover cropping? So things that they discovered after trying it, that they said, you know what, this is a benefit. A reality. That's the key.
Go ahead.
So, on the beans, we have definitely seen cleaner fields on the beans like Joe just mentioned. That's definitely a good one. It's easier to terminate winter high than it is some of these water that we're fighting. So, if you get a good stand and it's easier to spray that, then that's definitely, we've had guys that have made the weed suppression work in certain situations using rye. The other one that's fun, it's kind of a big conversation to have. There's a lot of ways to discuss it, but reduced fertility inputs that have been purchased using cover crops as part of the fertility program is a definite reality. It requires some other management changes. We may be needing to do some banning or maybe some in-season foliar applications as opposed to broadcast. But when you pair that with some cover crop in the whole cropping system, a lot less dry P&K is required. Can be required.
A couple of things I experienced last year. Well, I'm not a big fan of monoculture in the cover crops. We need that diversity, you know, going back to Barry talking about the fence row effect and the diversity in that fence row. One producer runs predominantly a clover mix ahead of his corn. He'll run a 50-50 mix of crimson and frosty Briese. And those two different clovers, well, it never I didn't put a second thought to it at first. But one clover will actually have a quicker decomposition rate than the other. If I have these correct, crimson will release most of its nitrogen about 30 days after termination, and then the frosty Briese, it's a lot bigger clover, gets a little bit more rank, its nitrogen releases about 60 days after termination. So we're getting two flushes of nitrogen coming into this growing corn crop. And down in Jackson County, which these are thin timber soils, or alpha soils, 3 inches of topsoil grading into an E horizon. And we raised 210 bushel corn across the farm on average with anywhere between 60 and 70 pounds of supplemental nitrogen. So most of our nitrogen came from those clovers that we had put out in that field. Secondly, you look at our region a little bit south of St. Louis. We had a band across southern Illinois that was a garden spot last year. I rode in the combine at harvest. This field did not have cover crops on it, and it was a 90-acre field, and we averaged 89.5 bushel beans on 90 acres. That has a lot to say about just the soil biology itself. We can have healthy soils with and without cover crops. It's how they're managed in the past. And this particular region, we were not liking for soil moisture last year at all throughout the entire growing season. We had a couple of weeks that it was hot, but we were never lacking moisture. So the rhizobium, the nodules were producing nitrogen all season long. The soil bacteria and the fungi were decomposing the residues and providing a large quantity of nitrogen for that crop to produce 90 bushel beans, especially for Southern Illinois. And we were a little concerned about the yield monitor, so we scaled that entire field, and we were within a third of a bushel when we scaled the field versus the yield monitor. Other things that I've seen with cover crops in the past, and this has been shown in research already, the annual ryegrass will completely knock SCN levels down in a single season. It's like it's just nematode. Cereal rye doesn't do nearly as good a job or wheat at keeping SCN levels suppressed, but the annual rye does a lot better job. It's had a lot more fine roots that will, as those roots mine through that soil, they produce exudates that trigger that egg hatch on SCN, and we have a lot of nematodes will hatch, and with it being a non-host crop, they die. And we can really decimate numbers in a single season with annual rye.
That's good to know. Taking that one home.
Yeah, considering 10 years of beans in some places, that's right.
I'm taking that one home. I got two stories. Now, one is a little shorter term, one's a little longer term. And so we started branching out with some of our cover crops, put some flowering species in it, and we're using field pea, little white flowers, and then a little bit of flax. And not a whole lot, real small rates. And we did these behind cereals. And then that next year, those fields, every one of those fields that we did it at, we did not end up spraying for soybean aphid. So what the interesting part was is that I started counting beneficials. Okay, so we found a lot higher beneficials where we had that previous cover crop because we provided habitat and we provided an alternative food source. So for ladybird beetles in particular, they will feed on pollen as an alternative food source. And we gave them cover to protect them. And so we didn't have spray for aphids in those situations on that short term. The longer term one I have is that guy that always tips his head on those slides. He's been doing this for 12 years. And he has found that his rotation is pretty much a cereal grain, a cover crop, soybean. Like I said, he can't figure out how to get soybean, cover crop into soybean, and he goes to corn after. So that 2 years out of that cover crop, and this year was the year. This is the first year water has not been a problem for us in this area. Our normal corn yields are right around 150 bushels, that kind of thing. He went 100 bushels over average on 5 quarters on that situation. 100 bushels over average on 5 quarters. It wasn't just one field or 150 acres or something like that. We did not put anywhere near enough nitrogen on it. Not even close to supply that bean. That's coming from that biology. But this guy's been doing this for 12 years, so it's a long-term kind of thing. And I've worked with growers right next to him all the way through that, and nobody was even close. Like the rest of the yields were better because we had moisture, but nitrogen became our limiting factor for the first time in my career.
Let's identify some negative realities that you've run into, that you feel like you were able to diagnose what was going on and maybe come up with a solution.
So that's easy. Again, so growing spring wheat, planting cereal rye, volunteer rye sucks. And it is prolific. And it will continue to grow again and again and again and again. The other one that we've had is those turnips I talked about overwintering. We also had radish overwintering. If you're growing non-GMO soybeans for the tofu market, they smell funny. And you're no longer a non-GMO grower in the tofu market. That one's easy. The other one we got hit pretty hard on was this cereal rye in North Dakota, planting into cereal rye early. We missed the window on the moisture. Like I talked about, moisture is always my concern. We got too dry. And we got a major hit on our soybeans out here. We figured we lost 7 to 8 bushels an acre on every field that was planted that way. Integrated.
I think the difficulties as first-time adopters, we try to jump in too quick and do too much diversity at once, and that becomes a challenge in itself in controlling these covers. We had some guys working with vetch. Vetch is kind of like annual rye and ryegrass. It's a gift that keeps on giving. I think only about 60% of the seed germinates at any one point in time, and the next thing you know, you're trying to figure out where it came from the next year. It does do a good job in releasing phosphorus from the soil. I've seen soil test values increase behind veg. I mean, it's interesting, you know, it's one of those that its root exudates and the bacterial and fungal population it feeds does release phosphorus from the soil, you know, all the, you know, the old rock phosphate or minerals that are higher than phosphorus, it does increase that soil slowly over time. That can be an issue maybe in the future. We don't know for certain yet because that's one of our precursors we're looking at is monitoring phosphorus runoff. I think the big challenge that we've seen is with the annual rye in that forage system for livestock and getting our subsequent nitrogen rates balanced out, because we're taking 2 cuttings of annual rye and coming back into that with corn after termination. And these farms, their rotation is annual ryegrass and corn silage, right? And that's their livestock feed right there on the operation. So it was a trick getting the nitrogen rate set, and it was a trial and error for the first couple, 2-3 years, because we're dropping now right around 15 to 18 pounds of actual in, 12 of which is going in the seed slot on the seed, and you're thinking, oh my Lord, what's he thinking? We did research studies when we put 7 pounds of nitrogen on there, we were reducing stands, but we've got so much organic matter below that soil surface now that the bacteria are going to up a big portion of that nitrogen that's right there at that seed slot. So we've reduced the issues of damaging that crop, and then we're dropping the rest of the nitrogen on top. Within 3 to 4 weeks, that microbial population will start to decline and re-release that nitrogen back right in that root zone. So we're getting some of those areas figured out, but it does take time. So that's been a drawback side.
In my area, we've also had issues like these with cereal rye and water, but it's with too much water. And so farmers will grow cereal rye for the first time, and then it'll get big, and they'll freak out, and then they'll spray it, and it goes down, and then it's just a mess, and they'll never do it again. So that's one of the things that jumps out in my area. And so that's weather related, but it's just, you gotta know how to manage it. And so that's
So how do you manage it?
well, you plant in it, let it standing, and then spray it later. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
A lot of guys aren't very happy if they spend $45 an acre on a multi-species mix and it dies because there's too much residual herbicide. Or you only got half stand of some of the brassicas or legumes that you are trying to put it out. So that whole cover crop herbicide interaction thing is everybody's trying to figure it out. And how do you get more clovers in the mix? How do you get more forks in the mix and get them to grow? If you've got residual herbicides that have got 10 and 12 month replant intervals. So we're still experimenting with a lot of that, what's working in our area. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I kind of go off of what Joe was talking about. I think, seeding date is so important, in the fall, and sometimes farmers try to push that. We were fortunate to have a few falls where we had a really long growing season and we lucked out. Then you look at this past fall, pretty short growing season. And then we see farmers that, because cereal rye is so adaptable and being able to seed that basically whenever they default to cereal rye, whether it's ahead of corn or ahead of beans, and then the next spring they have a bad experience with that, tying up nitrogen, they're not prepared to manage it properly, and so there's a lot of concern with that. Maybe in a program kind of required to have a cover crop, for that year, so they default to cereal rye, and they're not really prepared to manage it correctly.
Okay, any questions? How about cover crop misinformation? Whether it be something that you're seeing in a seed vendor's catalog, or something you're seeing in articles, or just, is there any information out there that needs some pushback? Are there any species that are getting overhyped that we need to, bring people down to reality about? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just, what I was talking about with seeding days, I think, radishes a little bit, we're somewhat overhyped, maybe not overhyped, but, we thought that we could still get a lot of advantage out of radishes even if we planted them October 1st. And, farmers quickly found out that that wasn't the case, so I think that's not to say that radishes aren't very valuable, but I think we have to think about the time period when they're planted.
One of the things I hear a lot that's kind of controversial is how quickly you can increase organic matter. And everybody has a different way to measure it. And some people advertise large increases very quickly. And I don't know if there's any standard for this or how people are measuring it, but I think that's one of the things I hear at a lot of meetings. And I think that confuses a lot of people.
I think the one that comes to mind to me the most that I've heard in a couple, 2 or 3 meetings now is that we need to convert all of our acreage to 100% no-till, 100% cover crops. Well, that's not for every situation. It's not for every farmer's checkbook. The thing I look at though, and with that they're saying, well, as you make this transition, you'll be able to eliminate fungicides, you'll be able to eliminate herbicides, you'll be able to eliminate fertilizers. I mean, take these values down to 0. I'm sorry, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, corn, soybean, wheat, hay crop, it still needs a certain amount of nutrients to provide that yield, and it's got to come from somewhere. And the cover crops is a portion of that puzzle, but by no means will fulfill all of those needs. I mean, I use the cover crops as a trap crop to improve water quality. I mean, we still need some supplemental fertilization in situations, So trying to eliminate that, we may be able to get there one day. I mean, the native prairies grow without fertilization. They take care of themselves. We have a diverse set of plants out there that provide a lot of different functions. But as you hear these comments out of the meetings, that we have a guy said that they have a farm, they don't put any fertilizer on it. Okay, that's great. I'm happy you're there. But the thing they have yet to tell me or explain to me is how many years did it take to get from point A to point B? Did it take them 3 years or did it take them 15? And I know the operation has been in cover crops for at least 20. So, but they're, it's going to take time. And that's just, to me, a misconception.
I agree with that. There's actually data in South Dakota that's just been done. I think it's been published that backs that up. They did soil samples on that grass strip that we've all talked about, and they did complete total phosphorus on it, and they did complete total phosphorus on the agricultural land, and he's got the trends of you're exporting nutrients. I mean, it's that simple. The nutrients are in the products that we sell those products, and they don't necessarily come back. In a natural prairie system, the buffalo would come here, eat here, move on. The same thing happens. It was a closed loop system. When you ship soybeans to China, it's not coming back, right? So it's a pretty easy equation to do. The other thing I would say is watch out for the religion of cover crops and soil health. There are religious sects in this. Don't get sucked into the religion. It's pretty easy to get sucked into it because it's a feel good, be good kind of thing. And once you start getting away from science, you'll find out that there's a lot of religion in this stuff. There's a lot of people that have religious beliefs on this. I'm all about being enthusiastic. I hope you can see that from me. But science checks me all the time. Just because I think I have something figured out, science will hit me upside the head. No, actually no. Biology is a lot more complicated than that. So watch out for that religion. That's the biggest thing I tell people. The other one is this whole more is better. I'm all for diversity, don't get me wrong. But I want to have a function for every species that I put in the mix. It has to have a reason for being there. And I want to know what it is. And there's a movement in my neighborhood that more is better. And the more you put in, the better it is, because you never know what's going to grow. You don't know what it's doing. We don't know what's going in the soil. Just put it out there and it's good. And we got guys in the 30 to 50 species cover crop mix. Yeah, you heard me right, 30 to 50 species. But then they're only doing $20 an acre. So my ag retailer was doing the math on this. He said, that's 3 seeds an acre. and that's true. It really is true. They're doing 1/4 of a pound, 1/8 of a pound of this stuff. They're putting it out there. And
And they go, well, I have 30 species mixed. I don't know what's going to grow. I'm just going to put it out there. Well, there's two definitions of moron, folks.
Yeah.
All right? There's two ways to look at that word. Okay? So keep that in mind, and that gets off this religious thing. And a lot of people are riding this wave. This is public. This is a big thing. It's a positive thing. You want to be part of it. You get on Twitter, you make a bunch of noise, you take only the best pictures, you put only the best things on Twitter, you try to get a bunch of followers, and you try to get speaking engagements in Illinois. Well, part of this is that religious thing, so be really cautious, and those people will sneak into it. And that's not saying that they don't have a good base and a good solid, but they get too far from science.
Amen, brother.
Okay, I was, oh, question, yes, go ahead.
I have a question, and it tails into that, and it's regarding polycultures as opposed to monocultures. You know, in a grassland system, you have species that fill in niches, and you actually have weed suppression with greater diversity. And I know that you get into 30. So what's a good threshold for someone like our outfit that's starting out? I'm not a big believer in monocultures. I don't want to trade out one monoculture for another. What's a good threshold you're comfortable with saying? Is it, you know, and I'm asking for numbers. Is it 4 species, a cocktail, or, you know, looking at and having a function, right? You want to look for function of what you're doing. So if you're not, no, educate me on what's a good number to look at if you're not interested in just doing on number monoculture.
All right, so the my plate thing throws up this whole idea, right? Different foods. There's 5 food groups of cover crops. Cool season grass, warm season grass, cool season broadleaf, warm season broadleaf, and legume. Right? If you cover those bases, I think in every 2 years in a cropping system, I think you're doing pretty good. If you want to cover them every year, I think you're doing pretty good. But honestly, the difference that I see between a turnip and a radish is whether you want livestock or not. They're about the same thing. Turnips are better for livestock guys. If you don't really want the livestock, then the radish fits better. So there's that form versus function. There's that duality, like the soil scientist was talking about with the microbes in the soil, the functions that they're performing. Some of those are redundant functions. Okay? So I'm going to say that keep your 5 food groups in mind. And when you're talking about a grass-science species, you're not really talking about trees, right? But trees aren't important. They're super important. They're really important in other ecosystems. Not every plant needs to be everywhere. And I think there's this misconception that the grass-science species have thousands of species in every square foot. That's not really true. And a good hunter will know this too, right? When you start going over the hills and edges, plants grow where they want to be. And there will be species sorting. There will be dominant species, maybe 1, 2, or 3 dominant species in a spot. And you move to another small feet, 20, 30 feet away, there'll be different species that are dominating there. I think 4 or 5 is going to cover a lot of bases.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, anywhere from 3 to 5. I personally know some guys that sell seeds, our cover crop seeds, and 2 things they want anywhere from a 5, 7. We've got a 15-way mix, and they've been playing with a 22 and a 30 mix, and then, like you said, 3 seeds per acre from each one of the bags. And bags go a long way if you keep doing that. But my threshold is 3 to 5, and then the other thing I look at is the seeding rates. That's where I get in arguments with the guys actually selling the seed. I mean, if you want to get a guy to start adopting cover crops, don't tell him he needs to put 60 pounds of cereal rye out there. Unfortunately, in Illinois, the NRCS standard is I think 50. And I've got guys, we're throwing 25 down, doesn't necessarily meet the NRCS standard, but we're trying to do something. They're getting their feet wet and they're stabilizing the soil at a 25-pound rate. So, are they going to get their cost share payment on? No, they didn't plant the 50 or 60 pounds per acre, but at least they're being proactive.
We've tackled it a little bit different way. I would agree with the comments that have been mentioned already. When we first started doing peppers, we started with a lot of 2 and 3-way mixes. And now we're up to 4 and 8-way mixes. I agree it does need to be functional. So we've kind of gone at it from the standpoint that working in a system, if you can get 2 to grow, great. Now add the next one. seen this in areas that, in fields where farmers have focused their cover crop efforts, instead of, like with CSP, guys will have to do a set amount minimum acres, right? And it was real common early on for guys that they moved their cover crop acres from one field to a different field, within their operation. And we started to recommend that guys say keep that focus on that same field, just change your mixes. And when you do that, we're starting to see better emergence of species subsequent years following. If you go radish for 3 years in a row, there seems to be more of them that come. Same thing with clovers. If you keep putting them out there, they come easier. You can back the rates down a pound or 2 or 2 pounds, and they come better. So we're adding in, we're trying to add in a species or 2 where we can, where guys are willing to. So that you be successful with your first 2 and 3, then your 4 and 5 row mixes. And then if there's a need for adding another species in, we're going about it that way.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Delma.
So I want to ask the panel, from your experience, what's the perception of farmers that are renting? What's the perception of them, their thought of cover crops and adoption?
They're more prone to put it on their own acres before they're going to put it on rented acres. That's what we come across that I work with.
That, or you have to have a really good talk with your landlord. And,
How does that talk go? What does that talk sound like?
well, it's not easy.
What's the concern? What's the landlord pushing back
Well,
on?
the landlord, a lot of them are really care about their land, and the pitch is, we want to take care of this and make this productive for years and years, and this is how we can do that, in a nutshell.
Wish I had your landlord.
They do it all.
Well, most of the landlords I deal with are a younger generation that has moved away from the farm, and they get a cash rent payment. That, if it's $200 per acre, and we ask them, well, they give 15 of that back to split the cost of cover crops. And, these kids left the farm because the farm wasn't big enough for them to come back. And now that they live in a city or a medium-sized town, they own property, but they have no vested interest in it, and they're just interested in that rent check. They really don't care because they just own the property, and they want that to pay the property taxes and go on vacation, is what I've seen and experienced. And it's a hard sell on that rented ground to put those extra dollars in there. If you're renting it, the thing is, I don't know what it's like up your way, but I've seen some really ridiculous cash rent prices.
You just say 200, I'm like, geez, we should come rent some land. We're at 150.
Nah, I got some that are along the 6-year plan at 303.
Yeah, okay, we'll say.
And, yeah, you just stay on.
Yeah.
But no, I just don't see how you can start throwing more input costs in there on that rented ground, and that's the hard sell to these guys. Like I said, ditto on that they put it on their ground, but not the rented ground.
It's the same thing. That conversation with the landlord is really difficult. We're on with the grandkids, so I don't know if the exodus was earlier than yours, but we're on with the grandkids as the landowners. And the other thing is that the way Grandpa used to do it was very different. We were in a crop fallow system because of our lack of moisture. And so as soon as we start talking about growing more stuff, he said my grandpa did it wrong. Nobody wants to hear that, and how poorly it was done. And he plowed it all the time, and so you start getting into being anti for what grandpa did. And it's really dangerous on that situation. I do have a few growers that have done cover crops, and I guess part of it is, some long-term rental contracts, 4, 5, 6, 7-year contracts makes it a little easier. That makes a difference. It helps stabilize the rent a little bit too. They get a little more upfront, but they know it's going to stay. Then the other thing is that sometimes forgiveness is easier than permission.
So those long-term contracts, they'll start doing it right away, and won't tell the landlord a whole lot. And then they'll start mentioning it, they'll talk about other land. Oh, by the way, we started seeing this on your land, we started reducing some of the weed problems, we started reducing some of these issues, and bringing it up that way. And it's kind of, I'm not saying it's the right way to do it,
Okay, any questions? So I was just up at a farmer meeting this morning near the Quad Cities, and Steve Berger was the co-speaker. And if you don't know Steve Berger, he's a very veteran no-tiller, 40 plus years of no-till, maybe 20 years of cover crops, and he grows some very high yields of corn. Really focuses on setting up his planter. That's, anytime Steve Berger is speaking, that's something he's going to talk about. So is there anything that you would like to say about setting up, whether it be a planter or other equipment, to make this cover crop system work? Are there any tricks, any tools, anything related to planters or other equipment that you want to mention?
You guys want time to think? I can go all the time.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the thing for us is, it's more about no-till conversion for us. The thing that we need to do is we need to start with combine, because if we don't manage the residue, we have a major issue. I think I see some nodding heads here. So we've got 45-foot draper heads, and we're spreading this straw 15, 20 feet. So you have this undulation out there, and it's not the same width as the planter or the drill, and so they're going across and they can't set it. There's a heavy bad residue, there's no residue. There's bad residue, no residue. It all starts with a combine for us.
For us, or our area down there, I think it is just a matter of getting that good soil to seed contact, and knowing the cover crop species you're planting. Each one of them is going to be a little bit different and can react differently in those seeding depths. So, the clovers, and say a Lespedeza or Vetch or one of those that are that larger seed, they're going to be able to come up from a deeper depth than something like the cereal or annual rye. I mean, every one has their ideal planting depth. And it presents a challenge when we're looking at trying to run a drill through that system. So it's just a matter of knowing your seeds, their preferences for emergence, and getting it applied in that ideal situation. We have a lot of broadcast seeding occurs out there as well. We've used a box and a helicopter and used the rotor wash to help spread that seed. But when you're doing the blend of annual ryegrass and radish, you can definitely tell it with a helicopter and a box seeder, because the radish will actually fly a lot farther than the annual ryegrass, and you get strips out there that have zero coverage. It's knowing the seed and how they're going to react in the environment.
One of the things that I do, and I kind of learned this from Barrett, was that the release of nutrients is different in a no-till cover crop program than it is in a conventional program. So when we switched from conventional farming to no-till without cover crops in 1995, we started putting on starter fertilizer and also started putting on nitrogen when we plant. And so it turns out that's an ideal way to plant corn after a cover crop also, because of the later release of nutrients. So we put on 5 gallons of 3-18-18 in furrow, and then we put 60 to 80 pounds of N off to the side of the row when we plant corn, and we have nice green corn after our cover crops. So that's what we do.
I'll echo Joe on his comment that he just made, especially when you're dealing with planters. Having nitrogen on the planter to match that carbon to nitrogen ratio, depending upon how much soil on or how much residue you have, it's definitely something that if you're going to be planting green in the spring, you need to have both placements in furrow as well as band off the side of the road, because they do different things, especially when you're talking about corn. Soybeans is a little bit different. One of the other things that we work with a lot is in-season foliars. In the same way that cover crops give us a benefit from the roots, we need that same thing with the cash crops. So if you do a good job early, you still need to do a good job finishing that crop out. And or even still again, nitrogen timing later in the season, depending on what you use as a cover for nitrogen release. it's okay to make a side dress pass, and or it's okay to do more foliage in season to supplement that cash crop. On the cover crop seeding side of things, I mean, we run a lot of broadcast seeding. That's where we started with. So with our high clearance rig, we're very conscious of, especially the timing and the dates that we go in that field prior to harvest. You got to have enough growing days for the brassicas and the legumes to get established. So not every species or every mix is going to be a good fit for a broadcast situation. And if you're going to do that, yeah, you need to know when is the best time to get it on.
So there's not a whole lot of drills left in Illinois anymore, not near what there used to be, and so some farmers are now starting to use their planter, their split row planter, to seed their cover crops, and seem to be very successful in that. They're able to cut their seeding rates down. Really good stands from doing that. They can split, put two different cover crop species in there, keep them mixed. Doing some, like Joe does, some strip till type operations. Also the vertical seeding, has become popular. A lot of guys have vertical tillage equipment and are doing some type of tillage, being able to seed, and if they have that tillage equipment set correctly, they can really not do about the same amount of disturbance as what a Great Plains drill with a colder cat would do. So, as far as the seeding and the use of existing equipment that they already have, I think farmers are finding ways to utilize that. And then just being able to have, I think we have more technology in our planters today than we've ever had. And, a lot of farmers, the conventional farmers have more attachments on their planter than what they even really need for what they're planting it to. So, I think what farmers have already and these new planters, they can really do a good job planting into these conditions.
Try and wrap this up. So I think if we maybe just go down the line, and if you want to share a final parting thought, I think we've covered pretty much all the issues that I wanted to cover. I think, if there was something more you wanted to say about how you see cover crops fitting into nutrient management, you mentioned backing off rates. How do you have the confidence to do that? What informs you that your soil is ready for that? It's something that was hanging in my mind, but any parting thoughts? Let's go wherever you want to go.
So probably the quickest two ways that we work with fertility obviously is within the nitrogen piece, and then there's the phosphorus piece. The big buzzword today is 4 R's in the industry, right? But I think it's just a lot of times people are just kind of giving the face value on the major ag retailers are not really doing right place, right form, right product, right amount. So when you go from a broadcast to a band, you can significantly increase your plant's ability to take up that nutrient, your efficiency of that fertility that you put in there, either in furrow or alongside a row, or as a forward technology, or and then the components within those, you have a lot higher fertility efficiency if you know how to place it and where to place it. And then when you marry that with the cover crops, and you look at legumes and cereal rise releasing nitrogen late, you can have the potential to back nitrogen rates down. So back to the religion thing, you don't want to go from 240 pounds of ply I'm just putting out there, and then all of a sudden I'm only going to put out 150. You need to kind of do it incrementally and work your soils into that system. But we've seen guys that have been able to successfully reduce, you mentioned 50, 60 pounds. It can be done. We've got guys in our area that are within 140, 150 pounds in our area, local area, on corn. But a lot of that has to do with nitrogen placement and how they're doing it at planting time and whether or not it's a split application. Same thing with phosphorus. So look at nutrient demand charts on when certain crops want them. And then you just kind of marry it up with placing the right nutrition where the crop wants it. There's a lot of ways to do it. So to summarize it 5 minutes is kind of tough. But when you do it with an infurrow and banded split application again, you can really back off fertility rates from pounds per acre applied. Nitrogen, phosphorus are probably the easiest ones to do.
One of the challenges that I have is the nutrient management part of this. So I take my soil test, which I think was designed to be used in a conventional farming system, and I'm just not sure how useful that is in a biological farming system. So I struggle with that. I use my soil test mainly to look at the pH and organic matter. So that I think there's a lot we don't know about that yet. A lot of room for improvement there. But one of the things that does help me feel better about this way of farming, because it can be scary. I joined or enrolled in the PCM program, which I don't know if people are familiar with that, as Precision Conservation Management. It's like FBFM, but they focus on conservation, and so you input all your records. The University of Illinois does it, and they analyze your inputs and your yields, and you compare your farm with other farmers. And so what I found is that my farming, my yields are pretty much the same, but my inputs are quite a bit less. And a lot of that is just because of reduced tillage and not using a sky-high nitrogen rate. And I also don't seem to need as much lime, and I think maybe that's because of the buffering effects of cover crops. And so my return is looking pretty good. I'm happy with it. So I think if we can show that it's an economically viable way to farm, and if we can save our topsoil, and also at the same time maybe help reduce nutrient loss, I think it's a win-win situation. When the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy came out, it raised a couple of questions, and the first one was, what's the strategy for implementing the strategy? And it sounds kind of funny, but what do we do? We know what to do, but how are we going to do it? But if we can farm this way, well, the other question was, who's going to pay for it? And so if we can farm this way and reduce nutrient losses, maybe we can do it without a lot of costs.
I'm going to answer this from a different approach. I'm glad to know, when Lee said he carries his shovel around with him, I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one. When we've been in focus, we're talking about cover crops, but we still need to be looking at that soil health as well. And from the standpoint of that shovel, we have soil health tests, we have soil fertility tests, we have soil physical parameter tests. But from the standpoint of carrying that shovel or carrying a little fold-up shovel in your back pocket, you can do more about assessing your soil health by taking that shovel, digging a handful up, and just using your hands, your eyes, and your nose. You can find out more about that soil. I'll pick on the older generation that's in the room. When we used to plow down red clover or sweet clover, that wonderful smell that we had in the springtime of the year. Now when you drive around, that brings back the old memories when you finally encounter that smell. Because we just don't have that anymore. That's the actinomycetes, the branching bacteria that infect or create the nodules on the root of red clover. And those days have left us. I don't remember when it was they left us, but all you have to do is smell that field one time and it brings those memories back. And so I can count the number of days I encountered that last year, and it was 3.
Yeah, that's sad.
And when I was a kid, it was every day. And and one last parting thought. A lot of people in this room know and remember Mike Plummer. An interesting aspect that Mike brought to a meeting before his passing, and I had some of the data, was he was looking at organic matter values dropping in Central Illinois. And some of it's the monoculture corn, and a lot of it has to do with the continued use of anhydrous. Now, I'm also a fertility guy, and you get more nitrogen or more bang for your buck with anhydrous. I'm not against anhydrous. what we're looking at is, and one of the known properties of anhydrous is it solubilizes organic matter when we apply it. So in these areas of monoculture corn, maybe we need to be looking and adopting these cover crops in here to start bringing those organic matter values back that we're losing. Well, that's my part.
One thing I'll have to say, and I learned this, you know, it's nice to be popular in this room. Outside of this room, I'm not necessarily that popular. Yeah, and the other thing that I learned is that there were growers 5, 6, 7, and 10 years ago that were very anti and very negative, and now they're calling me and asking me questions. There were agronomists that have been very anti and very negative, and now they're calling me and asking me questions. Now I could be that guy and say, you know, you were mean to me 5 years ago, why do I want to answer the phone? Or I could be that guy and say, you know, I really want this thing to be real. I'm going to put that aside. So I'm going to encourage you to put that aside, because there's a lot of detractors. There's a lot of people that aren't ready to hear that they have to eat differently, that they have to do differently, and there's a very visceral response to that. Give them time to think about it. Give them time to come around and let it go. Let it be water under the bridge.
Want to share a thought? Okay, so I think this, I had no idea where this was going. I think it went really well. I look forward to listening to it again myself.